Hello, boys and girls. Today we are going to talk about sculptures. What is a sculpture? Okay, sculptures are basically three-dimensional forms of art. And it has a structure, a form, and most of the time it's not flat. How are they created? Well, there are four basic techniques which sculptures are made up from. They can either be created by carving. Carving involves a block of wood or granite or even marble, and then using tools, special carving tools, sculptors actually will create the artwork out of chipping away parts of the block of granite or stone, and that is called carving. They have special tools to actually create this art form and create a sculpture. Next, we have modeling. A modeling actually uses more of a softer material which will later on harden to become the sculpture. A very most common use of modeling is clay. So clay started off as a wet form of a material, and then the sculptor or the artist actually creates it by shaping it up and modeling it into their desired artwork, and then leaving it to dry or putting it into a special kiln to actually bake it to make it harden, to make it more solidified. And then we have casting. Casting also use a different form of materials, which is it actually involves plaster. A plaster is actually wet medium, and then what the artist will do is to actually create a mold or actually create a form of a skeleton, and then they will use plaster to create and mold it into a particular sculpture or a particular form that the artist want to make, and that is using casting. And last and not least is constructing or assembling, where the artists actually have different parts of a sculpture that they want to create, and then they will put it up all together. Okay, so this is the different various forms of sculpting that sculptors actually take and use to make their sculptures. So that is basically it all. So as you can see, sculptures can actually be made up of different materials and different mediums and through different modes of creating them. This is one of the most famous sculptures, which is actually the Statue of Liberty. Now I'm going to show you some of the sculptures around Singapore. Have you seen these around? These are commonly found in very important parts of Singapore, like the city area or the town area. Okay, as you can see, these statues that I've shown you here are forms of human being, and the one in the middle is actually our Singapore founder, Sir Stamford Raffles. And right on the extreme right, you can see there's a statue of a fat bird. Okay, have you seen this around? Maybe if you have taken a walk or have gone to a certain area in Singapore, you might have seen these sculptures. And what about this? The one on the left is actually found at the Botanical Gardens. It's entitled Tai Chi because of the position that the statue is actually taking is a basic form of a Tai Chi movement. And on the right side, you can see two men sitting on wooden tables and wooden chairs and wooden table having their food. This artwork is entitled Another Day. Now, if you notice closely at all these statues or sculptures that you see in around Singapore, most of them actually tells you a story. It tells you about the Singapore history and tells you and gives you a glimpse of how Singapore's lifestyle was like in the past. And the kind of activities that people in the past used to take part in, like Tai Chi. And the scenario on the right side, entitled Another Day, is actually about how back then the generation actually work and sit down to have a meal at a nearby food vendor or a shop. We don't really see this kind of, in fact, we don't actually see this kind of scene in Singapore anymore because this is a glimpse from the past. If you notice, many of these sculptures in the early days take the form of human beings, or we call it statues, or nature, like animals, trees, and plants. So most of these sculptures actually tells a story, as I was mentioning. and tells you an idea about what was happening back in Singapore. And these following artworks and sculptures are done by the artist that I introduced to you last week, Han Sai-po. And these are her seed and floral series. Even she does some work that is very influenced by nature itself. However, her works are massive. They are very huge and they are very prominent. It's like when you look at the sculptures, you straight away know that this was done by Han Sai-po because it's a signature artwork done by her. And they are usually very, very massive. However, sculptures does not always have to take on the form of an animal or humans or even the nature. There are some artworks in Singapore and around Singapore that are actually quite abstract. These are the more of done by the contemporary artists who have a different take on things. Their sculptures are more abstract and often has a deeper meaning. And artists like to get their audience to look at their artworks and have conversations about their artwork. The one on the left is near a museum, and the one on the right is also in botanical gardens. They resemble certain shapes that are very familiar. However, they do not look like any animal forms or nature. But one thing they have in common between the previous sculptures that I've shown you and these sculptures are that they all take some space out in the open in the nature. And they are displayed because they invoke some kind of emotions in the audience. Okay? And these are done by some of other artists that are quite different from the sculptures I shown you earlier. The one on the top left-hand corner is entitled The Snail Queen. It is done by Dali, one of the famous artists. Although he does mostly paintings, he does sculptures that are very thought-provoking and very interesting to look at. In this case, he actually infused a human being into a snail-like form and called it the Snail Queen. And then we have another sculpture which is quite commonly seen at Suntec City called Abundance. This is one of my favorite sculptures in Singapore because it has a very illusion feel to it. If you look at it from far, it looks like it's a huge ring or a tunnel. But as you come closer to the sculpture, you realize that this piece of artwork is actually very thin and it's made up of bronze metal. Okay, it looks like you can actually go through it, but when you go nearer to this artwork, you actually cannot go through it. It's a flat object. And on the right hand, you see this artwork called Melting Superman. Or in other words, No One Can Save Us Now. That was a title named by the artist, No One Can Save Us Now. It is because the message behind this artwork was that Superman is a hero who always come out and save people's life. However, due to our very growing global warming condition, the temperature is getting very hot. Global warming is causing a lot of climate changes, and so much so that even Superman gets melted. And now, since Superman is no longer around, nobody can save us. So that was the message that the artist was trying to put across. So some of the artists, like the one who did this artwork, likes to put in some messages that people can learn from. Okay, and they have a very strong meaning because the idea behind a melting Superman and that no one can save us anymore tries to shows you that there is a very important message being put across here. Means we have to take better care of our earth and prevent global warming so that finally this earth can be safe for all of us. So all of these three artworks are done by different materials. You have bronze, you have copper, as well as the one in the melting Superman is actually made up of, if I'm not wrong, resin. Now, another point that I would like to put across is that not all sculptures have to be big or huge, or it has to be placed in a very wide open area. There are some artists who actually, for example, like Nihat Ozkan, he is a Turkish artist who does sculptures on pencil lead. So it is as tiny as a pencil, and he actually carved his sculptures onto the lead of the pencils to create his artworks. So this is a point I just want to put across to you that yes, sculptures doesn't have to be huge and very big. It can be as small as a pencil lead. I hope uh, the brief presentation on sculptures gives you a better idea about what sculptures are. And from here, you can actually go on to the next activity and put the test across about how whether you what you have learned about sculptures to play. Thank you.